You are a traveler among worlds, separated not by the loneliness of space, but by the company of biodiverse forests, plains, watersheds, and sometimes devastation. A path leads you to a spiral forest hut. You climb a ladder and peer inside, where you see a small, sad figure. A stranded soul looks up at you and recognizes that you wear an Order of Rowan medallion. She livens up from her melancholy and quickly opens up. Ever since I lost my fireworks stone, life just hasn't been as colorful or kind. You follow her woeful eyes over to an empty mantle. She asks, "Do you think you could find it for me? It couldn't be far." The quest aligns with your job class, and so you descend back into the chiaroscuro greenery below, and after some tracking and listening for clues, you notice a narrow, curving, colorful boardwalk. It leads you to a torii gate, draped in chocolate vine, and you pass through into another world. You climb onto a platform about chest high and take in a menagerie of colored dots, interwoven with an adventure park, ending in a landing that looks like part stage, part altar. And you anticipate that this gauntlet may have enemies who feel that you don't deserve to collect the sweets of this berrywood. But that doesn't worry you. What you suspect is that recovering this soul piece will ask of you a trial of sincere song, and you begin to feel butterflies in your stomach. This story I've just begun wasn't meant for the imagination, but was meant to be an experience to be lived. An experience we are calling a Liveo game. Welcome to Foresnauts. Foresnauts is what I hope to be the world's first Liveo game, as in real life video game. Think of it as a new kind of theme park, where people live out an adventure. Adventures that allow people to vicariously experience the kinds of hero's journeys that one would normally only live out and experience on the screen. These stories are set in living theaters. Think of them as little planets, stylized and designed natural environments that also happen to be functioning ecosystems. Foresnauts are the explorers, people like you and me, who discover these new planets right here on Mother Earth. Worlds where we can play the roles of who we really want to be. Spaces that bring people closer to nature, each other, and themselves. Levels where we are connected to our wildness, participating in the environment and discovering and playing out our soul's purposes. Foresnauts build these worlds and then play in them, discovering alternate possibilities, parallel dimensions, and new timelines of human possibility. They are artisans of outerscapes that encourage our innerscapes, offering places that bring us alive rather than represent a code of unwritten rules that suppress possibility. Foresnauts are naturalist adventurers. They are specialists in nature, both human and more than human, listening for creative partnerships that birth bio-immersed cultures that transcend the high consumption, low gratitude, global homogenizing system. They establish an array of conscious communities where people individuate rather than assimilate. Lifestyles that nurture and reconfigure rather than dismember and disfigure the Earth's surface. You yourself may be a potential Foresnaut. Me, I consider myself a Foresnaut in training. And I live with a forest garden which I intend to be the first living setting to host Liveo games. I guess I would call it a slowly developing, therapeutic, and game-intended homestead. So where does this all come from? What am I talking about? What is this channel about? Well, the story of this channel begins in a forest garden. An anthropogenic, human participatory ecosystem that my brother and I have been co-creating with nature on what used to be our grandparents' homestead. This means that people are a beneficial presence, establishing relationships with the other species, and contributing to a landscape that is more abundant and diverse than if human beings weren't present, or worse, just extracting and polluting. And on the land, we've experimented with all kinds of organic techniques related to growing your own food, regenerating soils, and reweaving an ecosystem. And this might make our channel's content seem like it's about rural life, eco-living, and getting off the grid. And in part, this is true. Our videos do feature the sort of what we're growing and making on the land content that you'd expect from those channels. And indeed, we do fun stuff here on the land related to all things eco and wild. And we've honed a strong intuition with the little green people that grow out of the ground. And we have plenty of experiments and little projects to share. But our focus isn't on productivity or setting up quickly. We're also interested in natural settings that nourish the soul, soothe the body, and stimulate the imagination as much as feeding the belly. And to be sincere, we've never been about growing and gathering a huge crop, except when the trees decided to drop it all on the ground. And I've deeply studied permaculture design, but never quite gotten around to installing the ponds, panels, paddocks, and compost toilets that I've long imagined on it. This is because this channel is being presented to you by someone who has lived for his entire life with CPTSD, but hadn't realized it until these last few years. And when you're dissociating from fear and have constant muscle tension that comes with a developmental and family trauma, it's hard to work physically for long hours or focus well enough to design, plan out, and complete large projects. And I've realized that I wouldn't be able to accomplish my goals on the land unless I attended to my mental health issues first. That self-care and being self-aware are as important as being self-sufficient. I've had to clear away the shame of the "you're a burden on society for not being productive" mentality that toxic culture has programmed into so many of us. I've had to learn to allow myself the time to heal, be still, to mend, to reflect, to be patient, and to move at the rhythm of nature, not the marketplace. And so this channel is transparent with imperfection. It's as much about the dazzling dream of building a Liveo game and becoming a Foresnaut as about the failure, frustrations, and blocks related to not quite being able to. And the resulting conversations make this a channel that deal with the themes of mental health, trauma, personal transformation, and conscious living within the context of a very earth-centered project. What's great about a project that's focused on nature is that even when you can't do all that you want to do on the land, trees still grow, animals still arrive, and nature takes over. And so right under my nose, this wonderful landscape has grown and become my primary ally in this healing journey. Having spent most of my time on my own since arriving, the land surrounding me has been my primary nurturer, teacher, and shoulder to lean on. During the lowest of the lows, when I was hard like a stone, lost in the fog, and felt nothing to live for, it was nature that offered me a glimmer of hope. And during the times where I was caught in an unending storm at sea, it was nature that offered moments where the waves of anxiety and panic would quiet. It has always been nature that has held me together, and still does. Thus, the content of the channel also has to do with rural life and solitude, dropping out from civilization, and finding oneself in the wild. Being on my own, away from the stimuli and pressures of New York, where I was born and spent most of my life, life in the countryside allowed me to really be with myself for the first time. And a deep and terrifying mental health journey ensued, where I began to finally realize how much hurt, anger, and pain were locked up inside of me. At the same time, on occasions where I reached very open and sensitive states through personal practices, I was also fortunate enough to have the sense to be out in nature, where exceptional experiences showed me parts of myself I didn't realize existed. Parts that were loving and wondrous, that were buried by trauma, and that I couldn't quite access on a regular basis. I've always been interested in improving the world, especially in the realms of ecological and social issues. And these isolated times showed me that if I wanted to actually help in these matters, there was something in me that needed integrating, needed healing, in order to access these parts of myself, able to act in the world. And so I also became interested in spirituality, gradually moving more towards therapy and what I would call soul-centered, emotionally aware, nervous system regulating therapy and psychology. So at first I tried retreats, meditation, yoga, kundalini, hippie gatherings, psychedelics, different types of ceremonies, sweat lodges, shamanic drumming, and while I could see their value, they didn't quite do the trick. My body was still stiff, my emotions were still suppressed, the chronic pain in my chest wouldn't recede. I was still easily overwhelmed by fear and stress. I just wasn't connecting to myself. My motivation to heal has always been focused on wanting to do things here on Earth rather than transcending it. And so I moved on into the world of therapies such as Jungian psychology, therapeutic dance and theater, Qigong, somatic experiencing, and especially parts work and TRE, which for me ended up being much more effective. These experiences have given me a lot of stories and lessons to share on the subject of healing and personal realization. They also help shape the Liveo game scripts I am writing, which I hope will help people learn about their mental health, give them new ways to work on themselves, help them face their fears, and contribute to their growth and development as people. And so over the years, I've had to focus on the internal. While dreaming of being able to realize these Liveo games, I've had to learn to be patient and dedicate most of my time to mental health and healing, and the very drawn out, years long journey has helped me understand the importance of taking care of yourself first before you can dedicate yourself to a cause, a project, to others. As the famous Gandhi quote states, be the change you want to be in the world. As in, the more you take care of yourself, the better you'll be able to help out in the world. But at the same time, this isn't 100% true. My work in raising a forest garden and following its succession into a mature system has been leading me into gradual synchronization with the natural world, with its forces and cycles. And I've been realizing that changes in the world can also become you, and that the inner and outer landscapes are a two-way street. I remember many times in life where, alone and trapped in multi-hour and sometimes multi-day panic attacks, or overwhelming manic episodes, and the embrace of trees being the only thing that could bring me back to center. And these experiences leading me to a deeper understanding of the old phrase, you are what you behold. And so, having watched this overgrazed and overplowed weary stretch of land become a living, complex web of life with personality, whose energy influences, affects, and inspires anyone who enters, I know that your surroundings can rewire your brain, resurface your heart, and show you and cultivate the buried parts of yourself. There is a power to place. There is more to well-being, happiness, consciousness, awakening, whatever you want to call it, than just mind over matter. You see, I recently stumbled on another Gandhi quote, and it states, "What we are doing to the forests of the world is but a mirror reflection of what we are doing to ourselves and to one another." And so my interpretation is, maybe if we can get together and regenerate nature, we can reverse the process. Maybe healthy environments will shine back on us another way of being. Maybe learning to care for nature includes lessons for also learning to care for one another. During all the isolation, I never forgot about society. In fact, most of my imagination and thought has always gone into how to bring about healthy communities and cultures, and into the relationship between place and people. And so I've left my isolation on various occasions, and I've had stints with intentional communities, permaculture projects, and multi-day courses where people come together to restructure and regenerate the environment around them. And I always noticed a repeating pattern. There was always something off. People fell into patterns of overwork and bottling up their needs and true feelings in order to keep up with the demands of the project. Most of us were being good little boys and girls who show how useful they are, who never cause conflict. And I always wondered, how can we reshape ourselves and the world in mutually beneficial and cooperative ways? How do we make better environments, and what should we model these new environments on? How can we work on them in authenticity, prevent burnout, and make sure people take time off of work for inner work and self-care? And I received an answer in the form of a vision. A figure wearing a space helmet, grass skirt, and entwined in vines that also wrapped into a backdrop of interlocking gears, while small animals were running amongst it all. And encasing this entire scene were stage curtains. The outer cosmic symbolism of the helmet, mixed with the gears among living creatures, sunk in for me rather quickly, evoking in me a sense that human invention is natural, but that our advanced technology should be rooted in soul, where we live an eco-centric life guided by purpose, rather than chase consumption and competition. But what struck me was this theatric symbol, the curtains. And I thought, what theatric experiences do we seem to be most enjoying and spending our time in? Movies, games, books, comics. And something popped into my head. It dawned on me that maybe life should be modeled on the stories we love most. Maybe life could be more like a video game. The Foresnauts seem to be indicating that life is a living theater where we create experiences for ourselves, much as how we build video game levels and then experience them. Life could be like a real-life video game, a Liveo game. And so, while I had already long felt that we needed to live in balance with the earth, and that the main fuel for our society's consumption and competition is fear and trauma, I didn't see a way of going back to simpler times. And spirituality alone just didn't seem like enough to me to transform us into a new earth-centered culture. And this is the core of this channel's ambition, to explore a new way of living on Mother Earth, to document the figuring it all out. And what the vision gave me was not a way back, but a way forward. A way to create a positive feedback loop between healing our fear and healing our environment. And what I've understood is that the missing piece of the puzzle is story. To be honest, while spirituality has helped, when I look back at my most transcendent inner moments, it has almost always involved my beloved earth and soul-centered movies and games. Pompoko, Princess Mononoke, Zelda, indie games like Spiritfarer, The Secret of Kells, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and so many more connected me to myself and to the divine much more than any spiritual practice. For example, when I was too depressed and dissociated to do anything else, it wasn't meditation that helped me, but these mediums. They were there for me. Uncle Iroh was much more of a caregiver and help to me than anything Ram Dass or Eckhart Tolle could ever offer. He was able to love the imperfect in me, the Zuko in me. While in spite of talking a lot about compassion, these aforementioned teachers felt like they were indifferent or judgy. And so the third main topic of this channel, along with nature and healing, is story, the arts. It all takes place, of course, in nature, a setting that provides the energy, guidance, and resources, but also sets the limitations and offers the challenges. It is the teacher of life that reflects who we are through its myriad archetypal beings and forces. Spiritual and therapeutic techniques keep our nervous system regulating and help us remain eco and soul-centric rather than egocentric, keeping us daring to make the courageous choices, willing to expand and grow in our heroes' journeys. And story. Story is what brings it all together. Stories teach us how to live, maintain a culture. They reveal what needs healing and fixing. It generates healthy conflict that stimulates resolutions, resulting in new realities. Foresnauts are the designer, listener, explorers who engage in this story process through Liveo games, developing new kinds of places in partnership with nature, living cartridges tailored to the interests, abilities, talents, and fears and limitations of the people they are intended for, hopefully leading them into fun heroes' journeys of becoming new, more authentic people that remind and encourage their wilder parts, welcoming intuition, longing, instinct, connection, inquisitiveness, nurturing, creativity, and play. And so as the channel progresses, I hope to document the experiences of my transition from neurotic to Foresnaut, track the constant growth and change of the forest garden, and eventually offer footage of the building and testing of Liveo games and the establishment of a sole family enterprise made up of Foresnauts. Along the way discussing how does one recover from CPTSD, or start a project, regenerate a landscape, or build a community. And what does this all have to offer? The great question of our times. How do we rebuild our society and explore the possibilities of this historical shift we are living through, this great turning? How can we create spaces that allow us to live our own stories rather than be swept away by the supposed events of the world, by narratives decided by an out-of-touch group of people in power who do not love us? And so I welcome you on this journey. I invite you to interact, ask questions, and share. Feel free to communicate and open up conversations about how our creativity can weave new stories that heal both us and the planet. Even if this channel's idea is lost on you, feel free to follow along anyway. If you are interested in self-improvement, care about environmental issues, or nerd out with shows and gaming, or anything else, or perhaps are involved in political, economic, and social issues, you will probably be enriched by this channel. And finally, if you feel like you may be a Foresnaut, or are intrigued by what it may entail, then please reach out. Maybe you're already a creative, or involved with the arts, serve in mental health, or manage a landscape via agroecology or some sort of environmental regeneration. Perhaps you're a bit tired of the strictures of the system, the lack of spirit, They want to transcend into something that truly plants the seeds of fun, future eco-centric cultures, rather than simply patch up the problems of the past without addressing the root causes of our separated society. You never know, we may be a good fit working together, being in community. And so that storybook world is here. Let's not forget that it rests in our wild hearts, as well as out in the wild woods and in our crackling herds. And let's figure out ways of living that keep the stresses of this world from muddling our memories. Let's remember the magic of what it is to live on this wondrous planet with our splendorous imaginations together.